We don't have that kind of money, Jennifer. You need to understand that. My father stood in my living room, arms crossed like he was scolding a teenager who'd asked for concert tickets. Behind him, my mother picked at her fingernails, refusing to meet my eyes. I stood there, my 6-year-old son Caleb asleep in the bedroom down the hall, his breathing rattling even with the nebulizer running all night. The hospital bills covered my coffee table like a paper monument to my failure as a mother. $85,000. That's what the specialist in Boston quoted for the treatment that could save Caleb's life. His kidneys were failing, shutting down bit by bit, and the experimental procedure was his only shot. Without it, the doctors gave him 8 months. Maybe less. My name is Jennifer, and I'm 29 years old. I live in Austin, Texas, working as a paramedic while raising Caleb alone. His father, my ex-husband Marcus, walked out 2 years ago when the medical bills started piling up. Said he married me, not a hospital, and I haven't heard from him since except for the divorce papers. That was it. No child support. No phone calls. Nothing. I've been doing this alone, working double shifts, selling everything I own, begging insurance companies who keep saying no. My parents live 30 minutes away in their paid-off house in the suburbs. The same house where my older brother Dylan still has his high school football trophies displayed in a glass case, like he won the Super Bowl. He's 34 now, works in finance, drives a BMW, and has always been the golden child who could do no wrong. Realistic? I repeated, my voice shaking. My son is dying. The doctors said without this treatment, he won't see his 7th birthday. How is that not realistic enough for you? My mother finally looked up, but there was no warmth in her eyes. Just discomfort, like I was asking her to do something embarrassing in public. Sweetheart, we've already helped you so much. We paid for 2 of his surgeries. We can't just keep draining our savings every time something happens. Every time something happens. Like Caleb getting sick was a choice. Like his kidneys failing was some kind of lifestyle decision I made. I'm not asking you to drain anything. I'll pay you back. Every single dollar. I'll work 3 jobs if I have to. I'll sell my car. I just need help now because Caleb doesn't have time to wait. My father shook his head, his jaw set in that stubborn way I knew too well. Jennifer, you're barely making rent as it is. How are you going to pay us back $85,000? Be honest with yourself. You need to look into payment plans. Medical loans. There are programs for people in your situation. People in my situation. He said it like I was some stranger asking for handouts, not his daughter begging to save his grandson's life. I've tried everything. Every program has a waiting list that's months long. Every loan company wants interest rates that would destroy me. I've called 17 different organizations, and none of them can help in time. You're my last option. Please. My mother stood up, smoothing her expensive blouse. The same blouse she wore to her book club meetings where they drank wine that cost more than my electric bill. Honey, I know this is hard, but we have to think about our retirement too. We're not getting any younger, and we can't risk our future for something that might not even work. Might not even work. The doctor said Caleb had a 70% chance of full recovery with the treatment. But to her, those odds weren't worth the money. They left 10 minutes later, and I stood at the window watching their Lexus pull away. The same Lexus they'd bought last year. Cash. No payments. I'd heard my father brag about it at Thanksgiving. I went to Caleb's room and sat on the edge of his bed. He was so small, so fragile. His face was pale, dark circles under his eyes that no 6-year-old should have. I brushed his hair back and felt the tears come. Hot and angry and helpless. His own grandparents just signed his death warrant, and he didn't even know it. The next day, I started calling everyone. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Most offered sympathy and $20 or $50. My mom's sister, Aunt Denise, sent $300 with a card that said she wished she could do more. I was grateful, but I was trying to build a mountain with grains of sand. 3 weeks later, I got home from a shift at the hospital to find Caleb on the bathroom floor. He'd collapsed trying to get to the toilet, too weak to call for me. His skin was gray, his pulse weak. I called 911, my own training kicking in even as my hands shook. They stabilized him at the ER, but Dr. Patel pulled me aside with a look I'd seen too many times in my job. The look that meant bad news was coming. His kidneys are failing faster than we expected, Dr. Patel said quietly. Without that treatment, I'd say 6 months now. Maybe 4. I nodded, unable to speak. My baby had 4 months unless I found $85,000. For months to watch him fade away. I started a fundraiser online that night. I wrote everything, poured my heart into the description, posted photos of Caleb smiling from before he got so sick. Friends shared it. Coworkers from the ambulance company donated. Even some of the nurses I work with contributed. But after 3 weeks, I'd raised $9,000. It wasn't even close. Then Dylan called. My brother's voice was excited, almost giddy. Jen, I have incredible news. Melissa said yes. We're getting married. I tried to feel happy for him. I really did. That's great, Dylan. Congratulations. Thanks. And listen, Mom and Dad are being amazing about it. They're paying for the entire wedding. Like, everything. No budget. Melissa's been dreaming about this since she was a little girl, and they said we can have whatever we want. My hand tightened around the phone so hard my knuckles went white. No budget? None. Dad said this is his son's big day and nothing's too good. We're thinking of doing it at the Four Seasons. Melissa wants a live band, ice sculptures, the whole thing. It's going to be next summer, but we're starting to plan now so everything's perfect. I stood in my apartment, medical bills stacked on every surface, my son's breathing machine humming in the next room, and listened to my brother talk about ice sculptures and live bands. Something cold settled in my chest. Not anger yet. Just understanding. Clear and sharp and cruel. Over the next few months, Caleb got worse. I maxed out every credit card I had. Took out personal loans at rates that would bury me for decades. Sold my grandmother's jewelry, the only valuable thing I owned. Got $600 for it. I moved from my 1-bedroom apartment to a studio to save money. Started taking the bus because I sold my car. Cut out everything that wasn't absolutely necessary. Rice and beans for dinner most nights. No heat unless it was below freezing. And through it all, Dylan's wedding plans grew like some unstoppable machine. Every family dinner, every phone call, every single conversation somehow ended up being about the wedding. My parents were obsessed. They toured venues, went to cake tastings, discussed flower arrangements that cost more than my monthly salary. My mother called me once a week with updates I didn't ask for. The invitations are going to be hand-pressed Italian paper with gold leaf, she said one afternoon. Isn't that elegant? I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria on my lunch break, eating a vending machine sandwich because it was all I could afford. Yeah, Mom. Sounds nice. And the venue, oh Jennifer, you should see it. The ballroom has these crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. It's like something from a movie. How much is it? The question came out before I could stop it. Well, I don't know exactly. Your father handles all that. But the deposit alone was $30,000. Can you believe it? Worth every penny, though. Dylan deserves the best. $30,000. A third of what could save Caleb. Spent on a deposit for a party. Caleb's 7th birthday came in October. I made him cupcakes from a box mix because I couldn't afford a real cake. He was too tired to blow out all the candles, so I helped him. My parents sent a card with $50 inside. They didn't come to visit. They had a meeting with the wedding planner. In November, 5 months after my parents refused to help, Dylan's engagement party happened. My mother called to tell me about it. Jennifer, you should have been there. It was at the country club. About 80 people. Open bar, past appetizers, a string quartet. Melissa looked absolutely radiant. How much did it cost? I asked again. My mother hesitated. I'm not sure. Maybe $8,000? But it was worth it. You know how important first impressions are. $8,000 on a party to announce a wedding that was still 7 months away. I felt something crack inside me. Not breaking yet. Just fracturing. That sounds really nice, I said, my voice flat. You know, Jennifer, I wish you'd be more enthusiastic about this. Dylan feels like you're not happy for him. I'm happy for him, Mom. I'm just dealing with a lot right now. You're always dealing with something. Maybe if you try to focus on the positive instead of dwelling on problems, you'd feel better. Melissa manages to stay so upbeat despite having a demanding job. Melissa's job didn't involve watching her child die. But I didn't say that. I just hung up. December brought a cold that Caleb couldn't shake. His body was too weak to fight even a simple virus. He spent 8 days in the hospital. I slept in a chair next to his bed, going straight from there to my shifts, then back again. I hadn't slept in my own bed in over a week. Dr. Patel sat me down on day 9. Jennifer, we need to talk about quality of life. Caleb is suffering. Maybe it's time to think about making him comfortable instead of pursuing treatments that aren't working. He was talking about hospice, about giving up, about letting my baby die. How long? I whispered. Without the experimental treatment, maybe 3 months. I'm sorry. 3 months. Christmas, New Year's, maybe Valentine's Day if we were lucky. Then nothing. My parents came to visit once during that hospital stay. They brought a stuffed animal from the gift shop and stayed for 20 minutes. They had a tasting appointment for the wedding menu. After they left, Caleb asked me a question that broke me. Mommy, why don't Grandma and Grandpa want to see me anymore? I didn't have an answer. How do you tell a 6-year-old that he's not worth as much as his uncle's party? In January, I got another call from my mother. Jennifer, we need to discuss the wedding. Dylan wants you to be in the wedding party, but the bridesmaid dress is going to be about $400. We need you to order it soon. For $100. That was almost a month of Caleb's medications. I can't afford that right now, Mom. Jennifer, this is your brother's wedding. It's important. I understand, but Caleb's treatment costs are really high right now, and I'm barely keeping up with rent. You're always talking about money. My mother's voice got sharp. I know Caleb is sick, but life goes on for everyone else. This is Dylan's special day. Can't you make an effort? I closed my eyes and counted to 10. Can I think about it? The fitting is in 2 weeks. Melissa has her heart set on having you there. After we hung up, I cried. Not sad crying. Angry crying. How did my family become so blind? My son was dying, and they were worried about matching dresses. Caleb stopped asking about school. Stopped talking about wanting to be a firefighter when he grew up. He knew, the way kids somehow know, that he wasn't going to grow up. He got quieter, sadder, spending most of his time sleeping or staring at the TV without really watching it. I took a leave of absence from work to be with him. Unpaid, which meant I lost what little income one had left. I applied for every assistance program I could find. Most had waiting lists 6 months long. Caleb didn't have 6 months. In February, 6 months after my parents said no, Dylan's bachelor party happened. My father called to tell me about it. They'd rented a lake house for the weekend. 15 of Dylan's friends. Boats, jet skis, catered meals. It was a great time, my father said. Dylan really needed this break before the wedding stress kicks in. How much did it cost? I asked, already knowing I didn't want the answer. Oh, I don't know exactly. Your mother handled that one. Maybe $12,000? But Dylan's my son. He deserves it. $12,000 on a weekend party. More than 10% of what could have saved Caleb. Spent on jet skis and beer. That sounds fun, I said. My voice sounded dead even to my own ears. You know, Jennifer, your mother is worried about you. You sound depressed. Maybe you should talk to someone. Maybe if someone had helped me save my son, I wouldn't be depressed. That's not fair. We've helped you plenty over the years. At some point, you have to take responsibility for your own situation. I hung up. I couldn't listen anymore. Caleb collapsed again in March. This time, he didn't wake up right away. The seizure lasted 4 minutes, which felt like 4 hours. The hospital kept him for observation. Dr. Patel's face told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. It's time to think about hospice care, he said gently. Make him comfortable. Let him spend his remaining time at home instead of in hospitals. Remaining time. Such a clinical way to say my son is dying and there's nothing I can do about it. How long? I asked again. Weeks. Maybe a month. 1 month. Maybe. If we were lucky. My parents visited once during that hospital stay. They brought flowers that Caleb was allergic to and left after 15 minutes. They had a final walkthrough at the venue. Dylan didn't come at all. He was too busy with wedding planning. He sent a text though. Sorry I can't make it to the hospital. Crazy busy with the wedding. Tell Caleb I love him. Tell Caleb I love him. Like it was a casual message, not a goodbye to his dying nephew. The wedding invitations had arrived at my apartment 2 months earlier. Thick cardstock with raised lettering. Each invitation probably cost $15. There were 200 guests. That's $3,000 just on invitations. I kept one, just to remember, to have proof that this happened. I learned later that the total cost of Dylan's wedding was $230,000. $230,000. The number lived in my head like a scream. They spent almost 3 times what could have saved Caleb on one day. One party. The venue was $85,000. The same amount I'd begged for. The flowers were $18,000. The food was $45,000. The dress for Melissa was $8,000. The photographer was $12,000. The band was $15,000. I learned these numbers slowly, through conversations I overheard and my mother's casual mentions. She had no idea what each number did to me. Or maybe she did and didn't care. 2 weeks before the wedding, Caleb had his worst day. His kidneys completely shut down. The machines were the only things keeping him alive. Dr. Patel pulled me aside, and I knew what he was going to say before he said it. Jennifer, he's gone. His brain isn't showing activity. The machines are breathing for him, but he's not there anymore. I think it's time to let him go. I stood there, looking at my baby through the window. 6 years old. He should have been playing soccer, learning to read chapter books, losing his front teeth. Instead, he was brain dead because my family chose a party over his life. I called my parents. My father answered, sounding annoyed. Jennifer, we're in the middle of the rehearsal dinner. Can this wait? Caleb is gone. The words felt like glass in my throat. He's brain dead. The doctor says I need to decide about life support. Silence. Then, oh, Jennifer. I'm so sorry. Do you need us to come? Do I need you to come? My son was dead. Their grandson. And he was asking if I needed them. Yes, I said. I need you here. Of course. We'll try to come by tomorrow morning. We have the final venue check at noon, but we can stop by before that. They came the next morning at 9 a.m. with coffee cups from Starbucks. They stayed 12 minutes. Caleb's body was still warm, the machines still forcing his chest to rise and fall. My mother cried a little, dabbing her eyes with a tissue that probably cost more than Caleb's breakfast ever did. My father stood by the door, checking his phone twice. We have to go, my father finally said. The florist needs final approval on the centerpieces. The florist. For the centerpieces. My son was dead on a hospital bed, and they needed to approve flowers for tables. Of course, I said. Go. We'll come back later, my mother promised. After the rehearsal dinner. They didn't come back. Dylan never came to say goodbye. He was too busy with last-minute wedding emergencies. The bakery had put the wrong color frosting on the practice cake. This required multiple phone calls and a meeting. I took Caleb off life support that afternoon. Alone. I held his hand as the machine stopped, as his chest stopped moving, as the monitors went flat. A nurse I didn't know cried with me. My family was at a rehearsal dinner, eating food that cost $200 a plate. The funeral was scheduled for Saturday, one day before Dylan's Sunday wedding. I didn't ask them to change the wedding date. I knew what they'd say. What I didn't expect was for them to ask me to change the funeral. My mother called Friday morning. Jennifer, honey, we need to talk about the funeral arrangements. I was sitting in my empty apartment, packing Caleb's clothes to donate. His favorite dinosaur shirt, his collection of rocks from the park, the books we'd read together every night. What about them? Well, Saturday is really difficult for us. The wedding is Sunday, and we have so much to do. Hair appointments, nail appointments, the whole family is arriving. Could you possibly do the funeral on Friday? Or maybe next week after the wedding? I stared at the wall, unable to believe what I was hearing. You want me to change my son's funeral because it interferes with wedding prep? It's not just prep, Jennifer. It's the whole schedule. We have out-of-town guests coming. Dylan is giving a speech at the welcome dinner Saturday night. We can't miss it. The funeral home should be able to move it. Friday would work better for everyone. Everyone. Better for everyone. My 6-year-old son's funeral was an inconvenience. I hung up without answering. The funeral stayed on Saturday. I paid for it with money borrowed from my boss, who'd done more for me in 1 year than my parents had in my entire life. 30 people came. Coworkers from the ambulance company, some nurses from the hospital, a few neighbors. My parents showed up 40 minutes late, dressed in clothes clearly meant for the wedding weekend. They stayed for the service, but left immediately after, skipping the small gathering I'd planned at a local restaurant. "We really have to go," my mother said, kissing my cheek with lips that barely touched. "Dylan is having a meltdown about the seating chart." But it was a lovely service, Jennifer. Very tasteful. Tasteful. My son's funeral was tasteful. I watched them drive away to their important appointments and critical emergencies. I felt something inside me turn cold and hard. The grief was still there, crushing me, but underneath it was something else. Clarity. They'd made their choice. Now I had to figure out how to live with it. Sunday, Dylan's wedding day, I spent alone in my apartment. I'd been sent about 50 photos in a family group chat. My mother kept texting updates like I'd asked for them. "Wish you were here to share this special day. Dylan looks so handsome. Melissa is absolutely stunning in her dress." I looked at the photos. The venue was gorgeous, everything my mother had described. Crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows, views of the lake. Dylan in his tuxedo, looking proud. Melissa in her $8,000 dress, glowing with happiness. My parents dancing, my mother's head thrown back in laughter. The 5-tier cake. The ice sculptures I'd heard about for months. The live band playing on a stage that probably cost more than my yearly rent. $230,000 of celebration. One day after burying my son. One day after laying Caleb in the ground because we couldn't afford the treatment that would have saved him. I set my phone down and made myself a promise. This wasn't over. They thought they could let Caleb die, throw their party, and move on like nothing happened. They thought their money and their comfort and their selfishness had no consequences. They were wrong. I didn't know how yet, but I would make them understand. Not revenge. Justice. A reckoning. I pulled out a notebook and started writing everything down. Every conversation, every refusal, every dollar amount. I documented the timeline. When I asked for help. When they said no. When the wedding planning started. When Caleb died. Who came to the funeral? Who didn't? Every expense my mother mentioned for the wedding. I wrote it all down, dated it, organized it. I wasn't sure what I'd do with this information, but I knew I needed it. Evidence. Proof. A record of everything they took from Caleb. From me. My phone buzzed again. Another text from my mother. Home from the reception. Exhausted but so happy. Dylan and Melissa's first dance was beautiful. I'll send the video. I typed back, glad it was nice. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. We'll stop by this week to check on you. I'm sure you're feeling a bit better now. Better. 1 week after my son's funeral. For days after they chose centerpieces over saying goodbye to him. She thought I'd be feeling better. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The weeks after the wedding blurred together. I went back to work because I had to. Bills didn't stop just because your child died. The medical debt was still there. $67,000 even after Caleb was gone. The credit cards were maxed out. Another $31,000. My rent was 3 months behind. Caleb's death hadn't ended my financial crisis. It just made it meaningless. My parents called occasionally, checking in like they were fulfilling an obligation. "How are you doing?" They'd ask, then fill the silence with updates about Dylan's honeymoon in Greece, about new furniture they were buying, about holiday plans. They never mentioned Caleb. It was like he'd never existed. Dylan sent one text, "Sorry about everything. Hope you're hanging in there. Sorry about everything." Like my son dying was a minor inconvenience we all had to deal with. In December, 3 months after Caleb's death, my parents invited me to Christmas dinner. I almost said no, but something made me accept. I needed to see them. Needed to understand how they lived with what they'd done. Their house looked like a magazine spread. A 12-foot tree with professional decorations. Lights on every surface. The smell of catered food filling the air. Dylan and Melissa were already there when I arrived, both tanned from their honeymoon, both laughing about something on their phones. "Jennifer." My mother hugged me, her perfume too strong. "I'm so glad you came. We've missed you." I stood stiff in her embrace. "Thanks for having me." Dinner was excessive. Prime rib, lobster, sides I couldn't even name. Wine that my father bragged cost $150 a bottle. Everyone talked and laughed, sharing stories from the wedding, from the honeymoon, from their comfortable lives. I sat silent, pushing food around my plate, feeling like a ghost at my own family's table. "Jennifer, you're so quiet," Melissa said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. You know, Dylan and I were thinking. Maybe you should consider moving somewhere new. A fresh start might help you heal. Austin has too many sad memories." I looked at her, this woman who married into my family 3 months ago and now felt entitled to give me life advice. Where would I go? I don't know. Somewhere cheaper? I know you're struggling with money. Dylan's company has an office in Oklahoma City. Cost of living is way lower there. We could help you find something. Help me move away. Remove the uncomfortable reminder of their choices. I'll think about it, I lied. My father cleared his throat. "Jennifer, your mother and I have been talking. We think you should consider bankruptcy. It's the smart thing to do with your debt situation." Bankruptcy. You'll never pay off those medical bills on a paramedic's salary. Better to just wipe it clean and start fresh. Start fresh. Like Caleb was a debt to be discharged. "We could help you find a good bankruptcy lawyer," my mother added. "Your father knows several through work." I set my fork down carefully. You know what would have actually helped? $85,000 a year ago. The table went silent. Melissa looked at Dylan uncomfortably. My mother's smile froze. "Jennifer," my father said, his voice sharp. "We've been over this." "Have we?" "Because I don't remember us ever really discussing it. You said no, and that was the end of it. We made a difficult decision based on our financial situation at the time." "Your financial situation?" I gestured around the room at the expensive decorations, the catered food, the luxury everywhere. "This doesn't look like financial difficulty. The $230,000 wedding doesn't suggest financial difficulty." Melissa's face went red. "That's not fair. Isn't it?" I stood up, my chair scraping. "You spent almost 3 times what could have saved Caleb's life on one party. On flowers and cake and a dress you wore once. Jennifer, that's enough." My father stood too, his face angry. "We're not going to apologize for supporting your brother's happiness." "And what about supporting Caleb's life?" "He was sick," my mother said, her voice shaking. "The doctors said there was no guarantee the treatment would work. We weren't going to waste money on something that might not help. But you'd waste twice that much on party favors that went in the trash the next day." "Get out," my father said. "If you're going to be disrespectful, you can leave." I grabbed my coat. "Don't worry, I'm going." "You're just bitter because your life didn't turn out the way you wanted," Dylan called after me. "It's not our fault you made bad choices." I stopped at the door and turned. They were all standing, united against me. My parents, my brother, his wife. All comfortable, secure, righteous. "Bad choices?" I repeated. "Like trusting family? Like thinking blood meant something? Like believing you'd choose your grandson over ice sculptures?" I walked out into the cold December night. Through the window, I could see them settling back down to their expensive dinner, probably already dismissing me as dramatic, ungrateful, bitter. That was the last time I spoke to any of them for 3 years. Life continued because it had to. I declared bankruptcy like my father suggested, wiping out most of the medical debt but destroying my credit. I moved to a cheaper apartment in a worse part of town. I worked overtime every week, sometimes pulling double shifts just to stay ahead of rent. I existed, but I didn't really live. I also planned. I couldn't touch them yet. I was too broken, too powerless, too consumed with grief and survival. But I was patient. I watched from a distance, following their lives through social media. I documented everything, adding to my notebooks. I waited. Dylan and Melissa had a baby 18 months after the wedding. A boy named Carter. My mother posted constant updates. The pregnancy, the baby shower, the nursery. The photos showed my parents beaming, holding their first grandchild. Like Caleb had never existed. I saw one comment on my mother's Facebook, "Your first grandchild. So exciting." My mother's response, "Yes, we're over the moon." Not a correction. Not an acknowledgement that another grandchild had existed, had died, had mattered. Caleb had been erased. I took a screenshot and added it to my files. 2 years after Caleb's death, I went back to school. Online classes at night, working toward a degree in nursing. I was promoted to shift supervisor after a year. The pay increase was small, but it was progress. I was building something slowly. I also started saving money. Every extra dollar went into a separate account I never touched. I didn't know what I was saving for, but I knew I'd need it eventually. During those years, my parents tried to reach out occasionally. Birthday cards with generic messages. Christmas gifts sent through the mail, usually gift cards to stores I couldn't afford anyway. My father called once to tell me they'd started a college fund for Carter and asked if I wanted to contribute. I hung up on him. Dylan sent a birth announcement when they had their second child. A girl named Harper. The card showed their perfect family in matching outfits, professional photo, genuine smiles. Someone had written on the back, "Hope you're doing well." I kept every card, every announcement, every casual dismissal. Evidence. 3 years after Caleb's death, I was a registered nurse, working in a hospital ICU, making enough to live comfortably. I'd rebuilt myself from nothing. Created a life that had purpose, even without the person who gave it meaning. Then, one spring morning, I got an email from a name I didn't recognize. Subject line, important family information. Jennifer, this is your Aunt Denise. I'm reaching out because I thought you should know. Your father lost his job 4 months ago. The company he worked for went under, fraud investigation, the whole thing. His retirement account was entirely in company stock. He lost everything. Your parents are facing foreclosure on their house. They're in serious financial trouble. I know you two aren't close anymore, but I thought you'd want to know. They're too proud to ask for help, but they need it. Please call me. Love, Aunt Denise. I read it 3 times. Then I started searching online. News articles came up immediately. The company my father worked for had collapsed in a scandal. Executives facing charges. Thousands of employees losing their pensions. My father's name appeared in several articles. I sat back and stared at the screen. After all these years, after building their comfortable life while my son died, they'd lost everything. Justice, some would call it. Karma. I didn't have a name for what I felt. It wasn't satisfaction. It was recognition. The universe had shifted. My phone rang a week later. My father's number. I let it ring, watching it go to voicemail. He called again the next day. And the day after that. I never answered. Then came a knock on my apartment door one evening. I looked through the peephole and saw my father standing there. He looked older, grayer, smaller. Diminished. I opened the door but left the chain on. Yes? Jennifer. His voice cracked. Please, we need to talk. About what? Can I come in? No. He flinched. I know things have been difficult between us. I know we made mistakes. But we're family. We need help. Help. I lost my job. You probably heard. We're in serious financial trouble. The house is being foreclosed. Your mother needs medical care and her insurance ran out. We're asking our kids for help. Dylan and Melissa are doing what they can, but they have 2 children to support. We thought maybe you could contribute something. Even a loan that you could pay back later. I stared at him through the gap. When I could pay it back. I know you're doing better now. I saw on Facebook you're a nurse. That pays decent. We wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate. Desperate. I remember being desperate once. Do you? His face went red. Jennifer, please. This isn't the time to rehash the past. Isn't it? You're asking me for money because you're facing financial ruin. Sounds familiar. This is different. How? We're your daughter and Caleb was your grandson. The silence stretched between us. How much do you need? We owe about $95,000 on the house. If we could get that, we could keep it. But anything helps. Even $20,000 would buy us time. $95,000. More than what could have saved Caleb. I'll think about it, I said, and closed the door. I leaned against it and smiled for the first time in 3 years. Finally, after all this time, after all the waiting, the opportunity had arrived. Now came the reckoning. I didn't contact my parents for 2 weeks. Let them wait. Let them wonder. Let them feel the anxiety of not knowing, of hoping, of being completely at someone else's mercy. Every day that passed, their situation got worse. I knew because I started checking the public foreclosure listings online. Their house was scheduled for auction in 38 days. During those 2 weeks, my mother called 23 times. My father called 14. Dylan sent 4 long text messages about how our parents had always done their best, how they were good people who made some mistakes, how family was supposed to forgive and help each other. The lack of self-awareness was stunning. I responded to none of them. Instead, I did research. I looked into their financial situation as much as I could from public records. The house was worth about $340,000. They owed $95,000. They had equity, but not enough to start over somewhere nice. They'd have to downsize significantly. Move to a small apartment, maybe in a rough neighborhood. Live on Social Security and whatever part-time work my father could find. It would be hard for them. Humbling. A complete reversal of everything they'd built. But they'd survive. That was the key difference between their situation and Caleb's. They weren't going to die. They were just going to be uncomfortable. On day 15, I finally called my father back. He answered on the first ring. Jennifer. He sounded breathless, desperate. Thank God. I was so worried you wouldn't call back. I've been thinking about your request. And? I could hear the hope in his voice, naked and pathetic. I want to meet all of you. You, Mom, and Dylan. We need to talk face to face. Of course. Of course. When? Where? We can come to you. Whatever works. My apartment. Saturday at noon. We'll be there. Thank you, Jennifer. You don't know what this means. I hung up without responding. Saturday arrived cold and rainy. I'd spent the morning preparing, organizing documents, setting out chairs. I'd printed everything. Bank statements, medical bills, funeral expenses, wedding cost breakdowns I'd found online. Timeline of events. Screenshots of social media posts. Everything organized chronologically in a folder on my coffee table. They arrived at exactly noon. All 3 of them. My father looked terrible, his suit hanging loose on a frame that had lost weight. My mother looked like she'd aged 10 years, her hair more gray, her face lined with stress. Dylan looked uncomfortable, dressed too nice for my apartment, like he was trying to prove he was still doing well. Jennifer, my mother said, moving like she wanted to hug me. I stepped back. Sit down. They arranged themselves on my couch, sitting close together like kids called to the principal's office. I remained standing. You asked me for $95,000. We know it's a lot, my father started. But we're willing to sign a formal loan agreement. We'd pay you back with interest. We just need time to get back on our feet. How? I asked flatly. You have no income. Mom doesn't work. What would you use to pay me back? I'm looking for work. Something will come through. At 64? With your name attached to a fraud scandal? He flinched. That wasn't my fault. I had nothing to do with what the CEO did. Doesn't matter. Your reputation is destroyed. Nobody's going to hire you for what you used to make. You'll be lucky to get part-time work at a hardware store. My mother spoke up, her voice small. Will you help us? That depends. I picked up the folder. I have some questions first. What kind of questions? Dylan asked, suspicious. I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. Do you remember this conversation? April 3rd, 3 years ago. I came to you and asked for $85,000 to save Caleb's life. Do you remember what you told me? My mother's face went pale. Jennifer, we've talked about this. Have we? Because I don't think we've ever really talked about it honestly. I held up a medical bill. $85,000 for a treatment that had a 70% success rate. You told me you couldn't afford it. That you had to think about your retirement. We made the best decision we could at the time, my father said stiffly. Did you? I pulled out another paper. This is an invoice from Dylan's wedding planner. Total cost, $230,000. Paid in full by you. 6 months after you told me you couldn't afford to save your grandson's life. Dylan stood up. This isn't fair. You're twisting everything. Sit down. My voice was sharp enough that he obeyed. I'm not done. I pulled out more documents, laying them on the coffee table one by one. Venue, $85,000. That's the exact amount that could have saved Caleb. Flowers, $18,000. That's enough for 6 months of his medications. Catering, $45,000. That's a year of dialysis. Dress, $8,000. That's his oxygen equipment. Should I continue? What do you want from us? My father's voice shook. An apology? Fine. We're sorry. We made a mistake. Is that what you need to hear? A mistake? I repeated softly. You think letting your grandson die so you could throw a party was a mistake? We didn't know he was going to die, my mother whispered. Yes, you did. The doctors told you. I told you. I begged you. You knew, and you chose the wedding anyway. I pulled out another document. A photo of Caleb in his hospital bed, taken 2 weeks before he died. His face pale, his body thin, tubes everywhere. This is what $85,000 would have saved. This child. Your grandson. Look at him. My mother started crying. Dylan looked away. My father stared at the photo, his face unreadable. Jennifer, please, my mother said through her tears. We know we failed you. We know we should have done more. But we can't change the past. We can only ask for your mercy now. Mercy? I put the photo back carefully. That's interesting. I don't remember receiving much mercy when I was begging you for help. When I sold everything I owned. When I moved to a studio in the worst part of town. When I buried my son alone while you were at a rehearsal dinner. We came to the funeral, my father protested weakly. You came 40 minutes late and left after 12 minutes because you had to approve centerpieces. I pulled out the funeral guest book. See? You signed in at 10:43. You left at 10:55. I know because the funeral director told me. You spent less than 15 minutes at your grandson's funeral. The silence was suffocating. My mother cried harder. Dylan stared at his hands. My father looked like he might be sick. But you know what the worst part was? I continued. It wasn't even the wedding. It was after. When you erased Caleb like he never existed. When you called Carter your first grandchild. When you posted on Facebook about how blessed you were. When you never once mentioned the grandson who died because you chose flowers over his life. I pulled out the screenshots. All of them. My mother's Facebook posts about Carter being her first grandchild. Dylan's Instagram about starting his perfect family. My father's LinkedIn post about entering a new chapter of life. Nowhere was Caleb mentioned. Not once. You deleted him from your lives like he was an embarrassment. Like he was a problem that got solved. My mother looked up, mascara running down her face. We didn't know how to talk about it. It was too painful. Too painful for you? I felt my voice rising. My son died, and it was too painful for you? You know what was painful? Watching him take his last breath alone because you had a hair appointment. Paying for his funeral with borrowed money because you spent $230,000 on a party. Living with the knowledge that he could have been saved if you'd just chosen him over decorations. Jennifer, Dylan said, his voice hard. You need to let this go. What happened was tragic, but holding on to this anger isn't healthy. Let it go. You want me to let it go? Yes. For your own good. This bitterness is eating you alive. I laughed, a harsh sound that made them all flinch. You want to talk about what's healthy? Let's talk about your bachelor party. $12,000 on a weekend at a lake house while my son was dying. Let's talk about your engagement party. $8,000 while I was selling my grandmother's jewelry to buy his medicine. Let's talk about your honeymoon in Greece. $25,000 while I was deciding whether to pay for his funeral or my rent. Dylan's face went red. I didn't ask them to spend that money. You didn't stop them either. You didn't say, hey, maybe we should have a smaller wedding and help Jennifer save Caleb. You didn't offer to postpone anything. You just took and took and took while your nephew died. I turned back to my parents. Here's what I've learned over the past 3 years. You didn't help Caleb because you didn't want to. It wasn't about money. You proved you had money. It was about choice. You chose what mattered to you, and it wasn't him. It wasn't me. That's not true, my mother said, but her voice was weak. Then explain it to me. Explain how you had $230,000 for a wedding, but not $85,000 for your grandson's life. Explain it in a way that makes sense. None of them could. The silence stretched on, broken only by my mother's crying. My father leaned forward. Jennifer, I understand you're angry. You have every right to be. But are you really going to punish us now when we need you most? Are you going to be as cruel as you think we were? Cruel? I picked up the folder and pulled out a check I'd written that morning. I'm going to give you $95,000. The change in the room was instant. Hope flooded their faces, desperate and immediate. However, I continued, there are conditions. Anything, my father said quickly. Payment plans, interest, whatever you want. It's not about payment. I set the check on the table. It was made out for $95,000, dated today. The first condition is that you acknowledge, right here, right now, what you did. I want to hear you say that you chose Dylan's wedding over Caleb's life. That you had the money and you refused to help because a party mattered more to you than your grandson. Say it out loud. They stared at me. Dylan looked at our parents, his face pale. You don't have to do this, he said to them. She's trying to humiliate you. Yes, I agreed. I am. Just like you humiliated me when I begged for help. When you made me pay $3,270 for a dinner where you insulted me. Oh wait, that was the other script. I shook my head. Just like you humiliated me when I had to bury my son with borrowed money while you drank $150 wine at a rehearsal dinner. My father's jaw clenched, but he needed that check. They all did. We chose the wedding, he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. We had the money, and we chose to spend it on Dylan's wedding instead of Caleb's treatment. And he died because we didn't help. Mom? I looked at my mother. We should have helped you, she whispered. We should have saved him. We were wrong. We were selfish and wrong. I turned to Dylan. And you? What's your part in this? I didn't know they'd refused you, he said quickly. I didn't know about the $85,000. Didn't you? You never wondered where $230,000 came from for your wedding? You never thought it was strange that I couldn't afford a $400 bridesmaid dress, but they could spend $18,000 on flowers? You never questioned having your wedding celebration while your nephew was dying? He had no answer. Here's the second condition. I picked up the check. You take this money. You save your house. And you never contact me again. No birthday cards. No Christmas presents. No phone calls. You remove me from your lives completely, the same way you removed Caleb from your memories. You go back to pretending I don't exist. Jennifer, you can't mean that, my mother said. We're family. No. I corrected her. We share DNA. Family is something different. Family shows up. Family sacrifices. Family doesn't let children die while they plan parties. I walked to the door and opened it. Those are my conditions. Take the check or leave it. You have 60 seconds to decide. They looked at each other, having a silent conversation with their eyes. I watched them calculate, watched them weigh their pride against their desperation. Watched them choose survival over dignity, just like they'd taught me to do. It took them 47 seconds. My father picked up the check. We accept your conditions. Good. There's a document on the table. It's a legal agreement that you'll have no further contact with me. Sign it. They signed without reading it. My father's hand shook. My mother could barely hold the pen. Dylan signed with angry, sharp strokes. When they finished, I collected the document. You can go now. Jennifer, my father started. You agreed to the conditions. No contact means no contact. Leave. They filed out silently. My mother crying, my father's shoulders slumped, Dylan walking stiff and angry beside them. I closed the door behind them and locked it. Then I walked to my laptop and opened my email. I'd prepared this message weeks ago, waiting for the right moment. I composed a message to Aunt Denise and several other family members, attaching a document I'd created. A complete timeline of everything that happened. Every request for help and every refusal. Every wedding expense. Every hospital bill. The photo of Caleb in his hospital bed. Screenshots of them calling Carter their first grandchild. The funeral guest book showing they stayed 12 minutes. Everything laid out in chronological, undeniable detail. Subject line, the truth about Caleb. I thought you all should know what really happened 3 years ago and why I'm no longer in contact with my parents or brother. The attached document explains everything. I've included all supporting documentation. Please share this with anyone in the family who's asked why I'm not around anymore. Jennifer. I hit send. By tomorrow, everyone would know. My parents' friends, their church, their neighbors, the family members they'd lied to about why I was distant. The truth would spread, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The check I gave them would clear. They'd keep their house. But they'd lose something more valuable, their reputation. Their carefully maintained image of being good, generous parents. Everyone would know what they really chose. What they really valued. An hour later, Dylan was pounding on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw him, his face red with fury. I opened the door but didn't let him in. That email you sent. You can't do that. You're destroying them. I'm telling the truth. There's a difference. You're vindictive and cruel. You're ruining their lives out of spite. No, I said calmly. I'm giving them exactly what they gave me. Consequences. Actions have consequences, Dylan. They made choices. Now they get to live with them. Just like I've had to live with watching my son die. They gave you $95,000. They gave me back a fraction of what they stole from Caleb. And they only did it because they were desperate. If they weren't about to lose their house, would they have helped? We both know the answer. You're never going to let this go, are you? You're going to hate us forever. I don't hate you, I said, and I meant it. Hate requires caring. I don't care about any of you anymore. You stopped being my family the day you chose a party over my son's life. Now you're just people who happen to share my last name. Mom is devastated. Dad looks broken. Was it worth it? Ask Caleb if it was worth it. Oh wait, you can't. Because he's dead. Dylan's face twisted. You really are as heartless as they said. Heartless. My heart broke 3 years ago, and none of you were there to see it. You were too busy planning the perfect wedding and the perfect life. So don't talk to me about heartless, Dylan. You don't get to use that word. He turned and walked away. I closed the door for the last time on my biological family. Over the next few weeks, I heard through indirect channels what happened. My parents were socially destroyed. Friends stopped calling. Their church became too awkward to attend. People crossed the street to avoid them. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. My father found work eventually, but it was part-time at a hardware store, making minimum wage. My mother developed anxiety so bad she needed medication. Dylan and Melissa moved to another state, trying to escape the scandal that followed them everywhere. Their Christmas cards, which used to be elaborate productions, stopped coming. I heard through Aunt Denise that my mother told people I was dead. That it was easier than explaining why her daughter wanted nothing to do with her. I supposed I was dead to them. The daughter who'd been grateful for scraps, who'd accepted being second priority, who'd swallowed her pain to keep the peace. That person didn't exist anymore. As for me, I continued building my life. I went back to school again, this time for my master's degree. I got promoted to nurse manager. I made real friends, the kind who showed up when things got hard. I dated eventually, carefully, finding someone who understood loss and didn't run from it. I traveled to places Caleb would have loved. The Grand Canyon. Yellowstone. The ocean. I scattered some of his ashes in each place, taking him to see the world he never got to experience. I lived for both of us. The $95,000 I gave my parents was worth every penny. Not because they deserved help, but because it gave me closure. I proved I was the bigger person. The one who showed mercy even when none had been shown to me. And then I walked away, leaving them to live with the weight of their choices. Some people might say I was cruel. That real forgiveness means letting go completely, helping without conditions. But those people never watched their child die alone while their family celebrated elsewhere. They never had to choose between electricity and medicine. They never had to bury their baby with borrowed money while knowing $250,000 had been spent on cake and ice sculptures. I gave my parents what they asked for on my terms. I fulfilled my obligation as their daughter one final time. And then I closed that door forever, just as they'd closed the door on Caleb when he needed them most. Years later, I established a foundation in Caleb's name. Small at first, just helping 1 or 2 families a year with medical expenses they couldn't afford. As I advanced in my career, as I made more money, the foundation grew. We helped dozens of families, then hundreds. Each child we saved was a piece of Caleb living on. I never forgot the numbers. $85,000 versus $230,000. The cost of a life versus the cost of a party. Those numbers became my mission statement, my driving force. No parent should ever have to make the choice I made. No child should die because their family valued appearances over action. 5 years after Caleb's death, I was featured in a nursing journal. Not as the mother who lost her son, but as a nurse manager who'd created one of the most successful patient advocacy programs in the state. The article mentioned the foundation, mentioned Caleb briefly, but focused on the future, not the past. I heard through Aunt Denise that my mother kept a copy of that article, that she showed it to people, trying to claim some pride in my accomplishments. The irony was thick enough to choke on. I never responded to their attempts to reconnect. There were attempts over the years. A card when I got promoted. An email when the foundation won an award. A text when I got engaged to Marcus, a pediatric oncologist who understood loss in ways most people couldn't. I deleted them all without responding. Dylan tried once more, about 4 years after our last conversation. He showed up at the hospital where I worked, waiting in the lobby until my shift ended. Security had to escort him out when I refused to speak to him. He sent a letter afterward. Jennifer, we were young and stupid. We didn't understand. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive? Carter and Harper ask about their aunt sometimes. Don't punish them for our mistakes. I burned the letter without finishing it. His children weren't my problem. He'd made his choices. Now he got to explain those choices to his kids however he wanted. The truth was, I had forgiven them in my own way. Not the kind of forgiveness they wanted, the kind that meant reconciliation and family dinners and pretending nothing happened. But I'd let go of the anger that consumed me those first few years. I'd stopped checking their social media, stopped documenting their lives, stopped caring what they did or didn't do. They'd become irrelevant to me, which was perhaps a worse punishment than anything else I could have done. 10 years after Caleb's death, the foundation had helped over 500 families. We'd saved 500 children whose families couldn't afford treatment. 500 kids who got to grow up, go to school, live their lives. Each one was a testament to Caleb's memory. Each one was the choice my parents didn't make. I got married. Had a daughter. Named her Callie, close enough to Caleb to honor him, different enough to let her be her own person. She grew up knowing she had a brother in heaven, seeing his picture on the mantle, hearing stories about the boy who loved dinosaurs and wanted to be a firefighter. My husband Marcus and I built a good life. Not perfect, but good. Real. Based on actual values instead of appearances. We taught Callie that family was about showing up, about sacrifice, about choosing people over things. My parents never met their granddaughter. They never knew I got married. They knew nothing about my life except what they could piece together from the occasional news article or social media post from mutual friends. I heard my father died when Callie was 3. Heart attack. Quick. Aunt Denise called to tell me, asking if I wanted to go to the funeral. I said no. I'd already said goodbye to him years ago. His death didn't change anything. My mother sent a letter after he died. I almost threw it away without reading it, but something made me open it. Jennifer, your father's last words were about you and Caleb. He said he was sorry. He said he'd made the worst mistake of his life. I know we can't change the past, but maybe we could try for the future? I'd like to meet my granddaughter. Please. Mom. I folded the letter carefully and put it in a box with all the other documentation. Evidence. Proof. Then I wrote back. One sentence. You had your chance to be a grandmother. You chose wrong. I never heard from her again. Dylan tried one more time when Callie was 5. He sent a birthday card with a check for $500. The card said, for Callie, from her Uncle Dylan. I hope someday you'll let us know her. I sent the check back, torn in half, with a note. She knows she has an uncle. She knows he chose a party over her brother's life. That's all she needs to know about you. The truth was, revenge wasn't about cruelty. It was about justice. About balance. About ensuring that consequences met actions. They'd taught me that love was conditional, that some lives mattered more than others, that money was more important than family. I simply returned their lessons, wrapped in a check they couldn't refuse and a truth they couldn't escape. And I moved forward into a future they'd never be part of, carrying Caleb's memory with me, finally at peace. Not because I'd forgiven them in the way they wanted, but because I'd built something beautiful from the ashes of that painful past. Because I'd taken their worst choice and turned it into 500 lives saved. Because I'd proven that you can survive the unsurvivable and come out stronger on the other side. My parents had spent $230,000 on a wedding that lasted one day. I'd spent my life building a legacy that would outlast all of us. Caleb's foundation would continue long after I was gone, saving children, helping families, making the choice my parents didn't make over and over again. That was my revenge. Not destruction, but creation. Not tearing down, but building up. Not becoming like them, but becoming everything they weren't. And every single child we saved, every family we helped, every life we changed was a middle finger to the people who'd let my son die for flowers and cake. That was justice. That was balance. That was the only revenge worth having. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. Your support helps us share more stories that matter, stories that expose the harsh realities families face and the strength it takes to survive them. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. We post real family drama every week, stories about betrayal, survival, and justice that will keep you hooked from start to finish. Drop a comment below and tell me, was Jennifer right to help her parents but cut them off forever? Or should she have refused to give them anything at all? What would you have done in her situation? I read every single comment, and I want to hear your thoughts. And if you know someone who's going through something similar, someone dealing with toxic family or impossible choices, share this video with them. Let them know they're not alone. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.